Hi, Sam Volkering here at the Australian Crypto Convention, here with Robert Novak, the brains behind the Split Chain Network and Zoocoins, and we're going to just talk about some of the common questions that we've been getting about the network and how it works, and try and break it down for everyone as simply as possible so that people can get their head around exactly what Robert's been building and how fantastic it is. So thank you for talking with us.
Good to be here.
Excellent. Right, first question that I want to run by you. Now, people that know a little bit about crypto, they know about blockchains, and it's quite a basic system to understand.
Yep.
Chain of blocks, all the transactions, you can go back, you can find everything from day dot.
Yep.
Explain to people as simply as you can. I know you're very technically minded,
Here we go.
genius technically minded, but break down split chain and how it differs from what a blockchain is.
Okay, it's a tricky question. So the biggest difference is it's not a consensus network. That's one of the big factors. So we'll touch on that in a later.
Yeah, we'll get to the consensus things in a bit, but yeah.
So that's one of the differences. Another difference is that the network only stores the last two transactions that you have. That's a big difference, normally. So in cases of double spends in certain scenarios, it stores a little bit more than that, but by default, it only stores the last two transactions.
Okay, so when I say that to people, I explain that to people, and then they go, okay, if it only stores two transactions, what about all the other transactions? Like, if I've done 100 transactions, where are my other 98 transactions?
They're all inside your wallet. So the network only is a caching network, basically. All the hard work is done by...
Can you explain to people what you mean by caching?
Yes. So the network only just holds some information for a little while because of the fact you could switch your phone off or you could close your app. So that data has to exist for a while. So other people that you've transacted with can prove that you still have what you have and that what they have is real.
Okay. So again, with those sort of other transactions, if my wallet's going to pull the last two, where do they live, those other transactions?
Those other ones are all inside your app, your Zoocoins app, which is a PWA. We can get into that as well if you want. But they stay all inside of your own app.
Okay, so ultimately, if somebody wants to find their transactions, it's their own transactions that they look for. What if all of a sudden an organization wants to look at this and they need to be able to verify that, other transactions have gone through, or, financial institutions and things like that want to know, somewhat of a provenance of where things have come from. Can other people or organizations look through other transactions and find them? Because like what we say, with the blockchain, it is completely transparent.
Fully, yeah.
So people are always asking, okay, how do I look at other transactions on the network? How do I prove, or how can I tell that all these other transactions are taking place and it's actually happening?
Yeah. So there's two ways to do that right now. So obviously, with a lot of the auditing process and the regulators that we've been working with, they like the fact that all the data sits on your phone. So that's one point of truth, that if you need to provide that information, you can from the app, just by doing a backup very simply. We've got some more ways of doing that more easily coming in future, but that's one way. The other way is that anyone who wants to deal with KYC and compliance in that sort of a way for their businesses, for whatever regulatory requirements they have, they can do that basically by setting up their own node on the network or cluster of nodes, which is just part of that caching system we talked about earlier, and just switching one option on to basically go keep more data. And you can choose how much you want to keep. By default, it keeps everything if you switch that option on.
So it puts the control of that data in the hands of
whoever
the
needs it,
individual entity that it might be.
That whoever needs it can control what they need to for their regulation purposes.
Okay, that's fantastic. And
So it's opt-in rather than like trying to opt out with other blockchain systems.
Yeah, exactly. With other blockchains, you have to switch off
Exactly.
that if you can even do that at
exactly,
all.
exactly.
But having the fact, and so again, without going too deep into it, we're talking about the power and control of the individual to choose how much data they share or don't share or have access to or provide that to.
So we put the power back into the people using it and the people running nodes on the network.
Which is an important and key factor in a truly decentralized network.
Yeah.
All right, second question. Now, we touched on this a little bit earlier, and a lot of people say, okay, well, now we're talking about consensus, right? And I'll give you a chance to explain how it works here. So consensus to a lot of people, proof of work with something like Bitcoin, proof of stake with what is Ethereum, but a whole bunch of other crypto use proof of stake. Explain to again, as simply as you can, you did a great job with the first question, but as simply as you can, how that works with split chain.
So with split chain, almost every other blockchain out there right now that's got any sort of popularity is based on consensus. So what that basically means, everybody has to agree on something. A certain percentage of people have to agree on something for something to be successful or to go through. That's not truth. So that's just an opinion. That's a voting system. With our system, it's built from the ground up to be a truth-first network, which means 99% of the network, 99 nodes on a network, for example, if there were 100, can be lying. You can find that one that's telling the truth. Your transaction will succeed.
Okay, so if 99 of them are lying and one is telling the truth, how do we not know that the 99 are actually telling the truth and that one is lying?
Well, everything is still cryptographically signed with proofs. So you still, if you find more than one thing that's a conflict, our system doesn't try and recover from it like other systems out there. Like some of the blockchains out there try and figure out what came first, what came second.
Yeah.
Ours is like, there's something weird here in this block of time. It's not going to move forward.
Okay, so I just want to get, this is quite a complex way of people trying to get their head around it. And it is really for those that are more technically minded around this. Like most people don't really need to even worry about how this works, but the developer communities and people that are technically minded want to know about how that functions. So again, if somebody is, again, I suppose now you mentioned it there, if there's conflict.
Yes.
When the network detects conflicts, how does that work? So where does that detection point exist? Is that within the node, within the wallet? And then how does that get resolved?
Yeah, so it doesn't work on the node. The nodes do not do any hard work that the peers consider what they use. So they don't use any of the stuff that nodes do, apart from the data the nodes have. So the nodes are just a caching system, as we said earlier. They basically just hold information for a certain amount of time until something newer comes along and supersedes it. All of the data in terms of finding what's real and what's not is done by the app itself. The app goes out and figures out across different nodes what they have, what they don't have, and tries to build an example of what should be and what shouldn't be.
Okay, and the app and the data that's all involved with the app, the plan I know you have is to take that open source. What's the steps involved in order to take that to an open source situation where you can let it free and let developers and programmers look at it, pick it apart, figure out what it is, and then build on it?
So there are 4 parts to that one. That's a good question. One of the things that oversee all of those things is the regulatory framework that's coming for this stuff. So we have a good idea of what's kind of coming over the next couple of years, especially in Australia. So we're focusing on making sure that whatever we release, as we release it bit by bit, each of the parts of the 4 parts that I'll mention in a second, that we try and comply with as many of the right regulations that we can to be properly decentralized. And those 4 factors are the fact that transactions have to be done on the app. You can't send it out to a network and then look for an answer, because that starts to centralize over time that we've seen with other blockchains. Like you saw the Ethereum just recently, last few days, the article came out on Decrypt that 2 staking pools have 40% of the validation power on the network. That's starting to centralize. That's not a good sign for decentralization. With our other approaches, we got the app as well. So once we're happy enough with the app, we'll open source that with a certain kind of license that encourages people to contribute back to the app. So we want to make sure that people keep building on ZooCoins and keep the coin increasing in value over time and making it more and more useful over time for more and more use cases.
I was going to say that use case scenario is really important to any network. Yeah. And as we know, the most valuable networks, the networks that provide the most utility, are those that have the most activity, those that are able to innovate and develop and grow. When it comes to that phase, so obviously getting to a point of open source is really important for decentralization. So it's very important for a network like this to then scale. Yeah. When it comes to people building on it and programmers, when it's open source, what can programmers expect? What languages are you using? And if somebody then wants to come in and start to innovate and build on SplitChain and utilize everything that you're pushing forward, what can they expect roughly when they come to do that?
It'll be a very easy developer experience. I'll just touch on your other points with the 4 parts of decentralization that we went through. Transactions themselves have to be properly processed on the app. We went through the app itself has to be open source and released, and with the right kind of licensing. And then the node itself is the 3rd part, and the 4th part is governance. So governance will be the last part for us to decentralize and cut that tie. Back to your question in terms of the developer experience. Rather than having developers have to learn a whole new language or a whole new framework, ours is very, very straightforward. We use the 2 most common languages out there for web systems. That is JavaScript and PHP. They're basically the most common things out there. So rather than having developers try and learn new languages like Rust or C++ and certain types of frameworks to build NFTs or UDAs on them and stuff like that, we try and go where what people already know and just make it easier for them.
Okay, great. Now, with that, when you start to invite people in to collaborate, build, develop, you're also going to get those that want to attack. And you're going to get malicious actors coming at it. Now, one of the questions that a few people have thrown my way, which I said to them, you're the man to answer this, which is why I'm asking you the question.
Yep.
What happens when somebody intentionally comes and tries to attack the network and take it down? What are the security measures? What will the network do in the event of a malicious attack?
Well, the most important thing for any network, any kind of internet-based network, is bandwidth. You always want to have more bandwidth than the attacker. For example, in a DDoS attack, you always want to have more power than the person causing the DDoS attack. In our scenario, if someone's trying to just flood the data with bad data, flood the network with bad data, the most important thing you can do, like we said with our truth scenario, it's not a consensus. You just want to be able to find that one point of truth still. So you just search more time on a network. And that's why our system, we actually allow 90 seconds for that to happen, which is lots of time for servers.
Okay, and is that just automatically done? So, if somebody's attacking the network, for somebody like me that might want to then send a transaction, is that going to impact that in any way? Does the network slow down if there's a big flood of like you say, bad data coming into it?
So as the system decentralizes over time, it actually gets stronger and stronger the more decentralized it is, which is kind of the opposite of most networks. Most networks, they get slower and slower the more moving parts there are. Ours actually speeds up. So it actually gets harder and harder to attack the network the more decentralized it becomes.
Okay, and in terms of somebody then trying to maybe inject malicious code or build something with malicious code in it, is that something that is that even a feasible outcome if somebody's trying to actually maybe replicate the network or trying to mint new coins? What's to say that someone won't be able to come in and just mint themselves 100 million new Zoocoin?
Well, like I said, you have to find, so long as you can find one point of truth on a network that disagrees with that won't work. So for that to work, you have to go around to the network and change just about everything everybody uses, both in the app and the network itself. We should basically have a new system if you do that anyway, so it's not really a practical thing to do.
Fair enough. And again, so then with that idea, can somebody come in and then just fork Bitcoin, fork Zoocoins? Not Bitcoin. Fork Zoocoins,
Yep.
and then create a completely new network? Or is it something that can't be replicated? How is that even feasibility or possible?
Yeah, so we're trying to avoid the scenario where there's 10,000 clones of Bitcoin with slight tweaks. So we're trying to avoid that scenario. We're going to look at some licensing structures that a lot of software projects have that are open source, like Ubuntu, like versions of Linux kernel, some WordPress sort of licensing structures where we want people to build on it and have value from it and keep growing it, but we also want whatever those contributions are to come back to the core split chain network and Zoocoin app. So we're looking at some licensing structures there like GPL and certain variants of that sort of thing, because we want that core ecosystem to not fragment in a really unproductive way.
Okay, cool. And then in terms of, again, it's the negative people will say is, what's to stop you guys from just minting another 100 million and then keeping them aside? What proofs can people see or find? Is it in the code that says, this is the total amount of coins that will ever exist and be fractionalized? How does that work?
Well, so like I said, it gets back to the fact that one node still has to be having that old truth, whatever that is, before it gets modified. So for that to happen, like I said, most people on the network would have to agree with that change. And that's not a consensus find, it's just a matter of finding the right truths. So long as there's one person who disagrees with that truth, everybody else who's using that truth won't agree with it.
Okay, and that all happens under the hood.
You never see it. We hide all that stuff away.
Exactly. Well, to be fair, and that's pretty much how most networks is, that no one actually sees or understands how that happens under the hood, so to speak.
Yeah.
I think that's all the questions I've got for you for now. I think hopefully that's cleared up a lot of questions that people have around how the network works, how the security works around it, how the consensus. I know it's not, but that's the sort of over catchphrase that people will use when they talk about how that works. Thanks very much for breaking that down for us.
Thanks,
and thanks everyone for watching.
Thanks, guys.